for this rendering, you're going to use a pencil just to really lightly trace the shape of the sphere, but we don't want to see the pencil when we're done. You'll have a sharp charcoal pencil and a tortillon stump or a blending stump. When you're rendering, you'll use the tortillon stump on either the background or the sphere, but not on both, so you can see the difference of when the texture of the paper shows through versus when it gets smoothed down, the values darker when we blend it into the paper. So for this, do remember to add the table line in so you can kind of separate the background from the table. Do not outline the sphere. Notice there's no outline visible around this. And do create a chisel point with your pencil. So that's going to allow you to have a much wider pencil stroke, so it's easier to do blending, and you can also use the sharp edge if you do need to get into a really tiny space like into here and you want to have a really sharp point that you use lightly. You can do clean edges with that. So it's more like you're painting with the pencil and not so much drawing lines with the pencil. You also should have done a value scale at this point. I just did this one before with 6 spaces, so it's kind of like it changes from 0% black and 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And then I used the tortillon stump on the right hand side, and you can see how much darker they look once those are blended in. So take the roll of tape and hold it way up by the eraser so that way you have a really light grip on it, and just lightly go around. So when you lift it, it barely shows. We do not want to have a line that's really dark. We just want a really light line. Then you can use anything as a straight edge, a folder, a piece of paper. You could use a ruler, but it doesn't have to be. And then draw a straight line for your table line. Again, I'm holding way up at the top end of my pencil. So in this illustration, the light source is coming in from the right, so that's the highlight. We have what we would call the local color, which would be the color of the actual object if there was no light bouncing off of it and no shadows. Over here would be more the core of the shadow, so things get darker. And then at the bottom here, if you look at the sphere, there's a light source underneath, so it's the light that's bouncing off of the table back onto the object, so you actually get reflected light right there, and then the cast shadow. So highlight, local color, shadow with the core of the shadow. Think about like an apple core is in the center. This is the darkest part of the shadow. Reflected light, and cast shadow. So I'm going to take this pencil point, and maybe I could start wearing down the point of the pencil somewhere where I don't have to be so careful, and I can make this chisel point at the same time. So if I'm looking at this area, I could start back here. I don't want to work there quite yet. I'm going to start over in the background at a fairly dark area and just start to wear that pencil down and get the chisel point going. So right now I'm trying to create values that are in this range. So nothing really light, nothing really dark. I'm just kind of in the middle value range. I'm practicing not having my pencil stroke show. And I can practice controlling these edges, bringing it right up to the edge of the sphere. Zoom in on that. There we go. So I have the chisel point, so there's a really nice sharp edge on one side of it. I can just come up to the edge of the sphere. I'm lightly putting a mark there, but you can see it's not an outline. And then I'm going to blend that in so you won't even know that edge was there. So I say edge, not line, because we don't want to see a line when we're done. We just want it to be the edge of the sphere versus the background. So here I can really carefully get into that corner, and I can roll my pencil over to the sharp point on it. So roll it over to this sharp point, and I can push this edge. By push, I mean darken it and make it really crisp and clean. And then I can roll it back over to the chisel edge. So the difference, what it will look like, is the chisel edge will be a nice wide line like this, and I roll it over to the thin line to make it even thinner. There we go. So if I use the chiseled edge, nice and flat, I roll it over to the thin edge, much thinner. Now I'm going to have to blend those in. So one of the things that happens with charcoal is you do end up creating a dust on the paper. So we're going to take that dust and just grab a scrap of paper or a piece of paper towel and just curve your paper and tap the dust onto that. I had already kind of done that, didn't have a whole lot of dust built up, but there is a little bit of charcoal on there. So I think that background looks pretty good. Don't worry about going right to the edge of your paper. This is plenty. You're practicing your pencil strokes and working with that. You can see I've used quite a bit of that pencil to do the background, but now I have this really nice chisel point that I can go in and kind of really lightly start to paint. Let's try to do this one without an eraser at all. See if we can do it without having to lighten anything. We're just going to start light and just keep darkening. So if I start here in this dark area, because that's pretty safe, safe meaning that I know it's going to be dark, so as long as I start light, I can just keep building and adding. So I'm still overlapping a lot. And as I bring this over, I'm going to use less pressure. Go right to the edge of that sphere. I don't need to have an outline because I have this background line that's really going to show. So in here, how the highlight is almost a circle? I'll kind of draw that on there really lightly. See how it's like almost a circular shape? So this shadow that's coming around, it's also kind of a circle. It's just that we can't see it wrapping around the back side. So we want to make sure that when we're shading, we're really kind of arching it with the outside shape. Not a straight line, but more like a C shape to go with the C on this edge of the sphere. Okay. I want to think about this reflected light now, this area where the light's bouncing off the table back onto here. So I'm going to start to soften, lighten, less pressure, my pencil strokes. And then I want this to look darker, so I'm going to put more pressure and I'm going to put more layers on here. Okay, kind of darken that edge and then blend it in. There we go. It's starting to come to life, starting to look more 3D. But again, notice how I have this C there. It's straight line. It's in a curve. So my shading should get narrower as it comes up the side here, and it should get wider as it comes to this part. Okay, so continuing on. So now I have white, I have the middle values, I have some low values. I'm missing these upper high values, kind of like that local color as I was talking about there. So I need to use this chisel point and really lightly try to make this white space a circle, but the areas around it should fade right into it, so it's not a distinct starting place where the shadows start. Barely going over the paper, barely touching the paper. Okay, so if I look at it, I can kind of see this little edge right here. It's kind of bothering me. So I'm going to try to really lightly change the direction of my charcoal pencil strokes, little circles, because I'm kind of going that way. I'm going to blend it in, make it a little bit darker as I come away. My highlight's getting really small. I don't really want it to get any smaller, so I'm going to try to fade this out. Barely in the paper. Even picking the pencil up in the middle of pencil strokes. If I see a line this way, my pencil strokes go the other way, so by the time I'm done, hopefully I have layers that would end pencils. Alright. Now, for the shadow, the cast shadow, we are going to make this reflected light really pop out by pushing this cast shadow darker. So what I'm going to do with that, sorry for the in focus, out of focus, I'm going to lightly draw what I think will be the right shape for my shadow. There's a little bit of a curve here, Again, keep it light. We can always make it darker. We're trying to do this with no erasing. There we go. And now, the same way I built this corner up into this little area, I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to start off with an edge, kind of a line, but think of it more like an edge, pushing this pointed part of the pencil, not the chisel part, but the pointed part, right in behind, underneath the sphere. And then I'm going to really make this dark. But even on this, as I get to the edge of this, I'm not going to make it quite as dark. Close, but not quite. There. Okay. So now let me give a little bit of shading to the table, but not a whole lot. So looking at this, I'm going to use a different kind of pencil stroke instead of doing this. I'm going to make really lines. So Joe, they're going to feel like they're of that horizontal. Careful here, lighter as it comes up. I'm starting to get fingerprint smudges. I'm just putting my pencil down and pulling away, so I'm really controlling it. I'm not doing ovals. I think I want to push this sphere darker now. Okay. Notice I haven't used the Tortillion stump at all yet. I'm going to use it on the cast shadow. And maybe a tiny bit in the background. I'm not going to use it in a lot of places. Just going to use it, as I was talking about before, pushing the edges. So let me zoom in real close on this one. Okay. So you see how the separation between these two looks a little bit grainy? If I take this and I mash that charcoal around, look at how it looks really solid black there now. So I'm going to kind of imitate this shape by doing a smaller one in the middle with the Tortillion stump and making it feel like a really solid cast shadow. And now I'm barely using any pressure at all. I'm just grazing over the top of the paper. There we go. And do the same thing right here. Table in a really strong, clean, crisp. And just to see, you can actually take on a Tortillion stump and you can even draw with that if you wanted to try to create some either dark values by pressing harder or light values. But I just want you to see that it really does have a very feel. It's more of a smudging, less textured. The tooth of the paper does not show through when you do that. So if you're going to do that, you have to kind of figure out strategically where do you want those smudges and where do you not. Oh, I found one more space. I would like to use the Tortillion stump just a little bit, not even the whole edge, but just a little tiny bit. Right there. Pushing the edge of the sphere out by making what's behind it look a little bit darker and more solid. Blend it Gotta blend it, it's bothering me. Okay. Fade it out. There we go. Now, one spot I'm going to erase. There's my finished sphere without using an eraser or any kind. One little spot at the end. I didn't use a kneaded eraser or anything, just to slowly build the values.